The shadow within the family. Ethan always knew there was something different about the way his family treated him. But it wasn't the kind of difference you bragged about. In the sunlit two-story home nestled in the quiet suburbs of Minnesota, the walls all echoed with the laughter of his younger sister, Ava. Their parents seemed to orbit around her without question, a permanent gravitational pull. Sometimes, Ethan wondered if he was little more than a distant satellite in their universe. Sunday mornings were the most revealing. In the kitchen, the smell of fresh pancakes would curl through the air like a promise. Ethan sat at the end of the table, watching his mother pile a double helping of whipped cream onto Ava's plate. Their father, still in his faded college football shirt, ruffled Ava's hair, his eyes soft with pride. "Did you finish your science project, sweetheart?" their dad asked, ignoring Ethan's empty glass, ignoring that he too had a science project due Monday. Ava grinned, revealing a missing tooth. "Almost, Daddy. You said you'd help me with the model volcano." "That's my girl," he crowed, leaning over to kiss the top of her head. Ethan glanced down at his hands, silent. No one asked about his project. Later that day, when the three of them headed out to Ava's soccer practice, Ethan's mom noticed his unzipped backpack. "Why are you always so messy, Ethan? Ava never forgets to zip hers." The comment slipped out like a fact, but Ethan felt the sting anyway. Even little things, it was always Ava, never him. At night, when the house was still, Ethan listened to the muffled voices from his parents' room. He caught fragments of talk, always about Ava, her grades, her friends, her shining personality, or how Ethan just doesn't try hard enough. Lying in bed, he learned to swallow envy and sadness, learned to pretend it didn't bother him. Yet it did. The shadow grew with each passing day, stretching quietly across the family photos on the wall. In most pictures, Ava was at the center, as if to confirm who really mattered. Ethan remained, a blurred shape in the background, always present, rarely seen. Met happen, as warm hands gently brushed away her tears. These weren't isolated moments, they piled up. Like the time he came home late after school, his bus delayed by winter snow. His mother greeted him with a thinly veiled worry that quickly turned sour. "You always forget to call." "Not everyone ignores the rules the way you do," Ava giggled somewhere nearby, building a fort out of sofa cushions, oblivious to the storm. At school, Ethan watched other kids run to the fence at the end of the day, swept up in broad-armed hugs. When his mom picked him up, she'd barely look away from her phone, sometimes forgetting him entirely if Ava had an after-school recital or was at home with a fever. As the years passed, Ethan started to shrink into the background of family life. He learned how to mask disappointment, to clench his jaw when praise landed squarely on his sister, never on him. When he was sick, his mother laid out a bottle of Tylenol on the bathroom counter, but barely slowed her routine. When Ava sneezed, she'd be bundled in blankets, her parents cooing worriedly by her side. Ethan's father sometimes lectured him about being a man, as if pain, sadness, and loneliness were just weights to be carried without complaint. One cold December afternoon, after Ethan's baseball team lost the season finals, he trudged home, replaying the missed catch in his mind. He found Ava surrounded by trophies from her dance competition that day, their father kneeling beside her for a photo, pride glowing in his eyes. Ethan's own disappointment was invisible, swallowed whole by silence. If Ava ever noticed the difference, she never said. She basked in her place at the center, while Ethan drifted further toward the edges. Childhood, for him, became a lesson in how praise and warmth could be rationed out, never truly earned. only given to those deemed deserving before the contest even began. He learned to rely on himself. After all, nobody else seemed to notice when he turned inward, or how his laughter faded, day by day, to nothing more than a whisper. The need for recognition. As Ethan grew older, the need to be noticed, seen, if only for a moment, became himself into soccer next. After weeks of practice, he scored the winning goal in the middle school championship. He searched the crowd for their faces, expecting their cheers to rise above the noise. He found them, clapping politely but not standing, and not even at the right moment. "You should have passed to Kyle. He was open," his father remarked in the car, as if giving feedback would be a sufficient substitute for applause. School became a second battleground. Teachers noticed Ethan's quiet diligence, his tendency to linger after class with extra questions or stay late for the math club. Sometimes a compliment would filter home through a parent-teacher meeting. "He's a good kid," his homeroom teacher would say. But he's not as outgoing as Ava," his mother would answer, eyeing her calendar for the next family event. The harder he tried, the more invisible he seemed to become. Ava's every milestone was a family affair, her birthday parties, school art shows, even her first heartbreak, each celebrated with cakes, gifts, and long phone calls from relatives across the country. Ethan would watch it all from the other side of the room, hands buried deep in his pockets, as if physical distance might blunt the sting of exclusion. One autumn night, Ethan sat on the back steps, breath puffing into the chilly dark. He clutched his report card. Straight A's. Another list of small victories. Inside, the family crowded around Ava, admiring the sketchbook she'd filled with colorful drawings. "You're so talented, sweetheart," his father called. Ethan's mother laughed, leaning over Ava's shoulder, and for a moment, the house belonged to only them. Ethan looked up at the stars. He no longer believed that trying harder would earn him a place in their light. Still, some stubborn ember inside him refused to give up. Maybe, he thought, if he did something truly special, they would have to see him. With that thought, Ethan tucked the report card into the pocket of his coat and stared out at the night, promise and ache wrapped tight around his heart. His and his alone. The freedom was dizzying, but so too was the responsibility. The money from his scholarships barely covered tuition and housing. Anything else, books, meals, an occasional coffee with classmates, he'd have to earn. So Ethan found work wherever he could, shelving books in the campus library, mopping floors in the dining hall, tutoring calculus for a few extra dollars. Sometimes he took shifts that ended after midnight, shuffling home under blinking streetlights with his backpack heavy on his shoulders, and the satisfaction of self-sufficiency deeper than any exhaustion. He never mentioned his grinding schedule to his parents. When they called, rarely between Ava's swim meets and her college prep, they asked if he needed anything. Ethan always said no, even when his checking account flirted dangerously with zero. Sometimes he caught his reflection in the tall library windows, surprised by how quickly his features had sharpened, the soft outlines of his youth giving way to the harder lines of determination. Despite the stress, Ethan discovered a quiet pride in how he navigated the demands of school and work. He built a life from scratch, found warmth in friendships with other students, solace in late-night conversations over cheap pizza, a sense of belonging in the gentle chaos of his roommate's laughter. For the first time, Ethan could choose where to fit in, and more importantly, who to let in. Teachers began to notice him, not for outshining Ava, but for his questions, his drive, his thoughtful silences during seminar debates. The compliments were small at first, a nod here, a praising note at the bottom of a paper. But unlike home, each one felt real, earned. He learned, too, to relish solitude, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity. On nights when the world felt too heavy, Ethan would visit the city's overlook, watching headlights weave along distant highways, and promise himself that no matter what, he would keep moving forward. Yes, there were setbacks. A bout with the flu that cost him a week of shifts. A failed quiz that dragged down his GPA. The gnawing ache of homesickness that sometimes struck without warning. Prestigious research internship, late nights, revisions, hours spent polishing every word of his essay. In his mind, the position was more than just a resume boost. It meant extra money, relief from crushing shifts, validation for all his sacrifices. The rejection email arrived on a Thursday morning, bordered in polite indifference. "We regret to inform you." He stared at the words for a long time, icy dread blooming in his chest. He hadn't told anyone how much it mattered to him, not even his closest friend, Marcus. That week, as if in sympathy with his mood, the world seemed to turn against him. On Friday, his boss at the dining hall told him his hours were being cut. New hires meant fewer shifts all around. By Sunday, after a grueling double shift at the library, he trudged home through knee-deep snow, only to find his mailbox stuffed with a final notice. His student loan disbursement was delayed due to a paperwork error. Numb, Ethan sat at his tiny kitchen table, calculating every dollar he had left. It wasn't enough. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and his checking account balance glowed red. With nowhere else to turn, Ethan called home, voice tight with embarrassment. His mom answered, her voice bright with the background noise of a family dinner. He explained as simply as he could. He'd lost some hours at work. The loan was delayed. He just needed a small loan, just to stay afloat. There was a pause on the line, then a sigh. "You need to be more careful with money, Ethan. Have you tried talking to your advisor? You know, your sister is applying for 3 scholarships this month. Maybe she can help you figure things out." He thanked her anyway, swallowing his pride, along with the urge to remind her that Ava had never worked a day in her life. That night, as Ethan folded up on his bed, loneliness felt different, harsher than in childhood, not just being ignored, but being totally unseen. A few days later, Marcus spotted Ethan at the gym, dark circles painting hollows under his eyes. "You good, man? You look rough." Ethan managed a smile. Just tired, finals and all. He would never admit how close he was to breaking, how failure felt like a shadow that clung to every step. He'd have to be his own rescue. Small successes and newfound confidence. By late spring, the icicles had melted from the dorm eaves, and the campus lawns shone bright and green under a sky the color of robin's eggs. Ethan stood outside the library, breathing in air scented faintly with lilacs, and let himself feel, just for a moment, that the darkest season had passed. The hard winter had left its mark, but so had the ways Ethan fought through it. He remembered the moment the financial aid finally came through, the short, triumphant email blinking on his phone. There was no parade, no family celebration. He simply exhaled and let relief ripple through his body. He paid the rent, bought new notebooks, even splurged on a pizza to split with Marcus one midnight after finals. His classes, too, revealed a new pattern. The more he relied on himself, the more his work shone. In his philosophy seminar, Ethan argued a complicated theory on free will, a presentation he'd agonized over for days, and the professor, usually quick to criticize, nodded in approval. "Excellent analysis, Mr. Webb," she declared when he finished. The words felt weighty, crisp, genuine, so different from all those hollow compliments paid to Ava for showing up. Opportunities, once so rare, began to appear. A new professor invited Ethan to join a student research circle, intrigued by his analytical mind and curious nature. At first, Ethan had hesitated, expecting the old doubts to crowd in. But he accepted, voice steady, chin lifted. In the group, he surprised himself by speaking up, poking holes in faulty logic, sometimes even making his peers laugh. The meetings became a highlight in his week, moments when he felt not only seen, but respected. Marcus noticed the change too. One Sunday, they sat beneath an oak tree, books open, but conversation easy and meandering. "You're different lately, man," Marcus said with a grin. "Like you actually believe in yourself." Ethan thought about it, then realized it was true. The bruises from childhood earned this, Ethan. Don't doubt it. Walking home that afternoon, letter clutched tight, Ethan realized something essential. He still craved recognition, but now it was his own that mattered most. Each small victory, a finished assignment, a compliment from a mentor, even just a good night's rest after a day of hard work, became a brick in the foundation of someone he was finally proud to be. With summer beckoning, Ethan knew bigger challenges would come, but as he crossed the quad, sunlight warm on his face, he felt, for the first time, ready for them. Not perfect or fearless, but confident at last in his ability to create his own place in the world. Re-examining family ties. Summer came with a hush. Campus emptied of its usual chatter, replaced by the steady drone of cicadas and the chirr of an occasionally passing lawnmower. The sense of possibility that filled Ethan's veins was tempered by something familiar and unsettling: the need to go home, to the house he'd carefully left behind. He arrived on a Saturday afternoon, the air heavy with blooming hydrangeas and old memories. The front door was sticky with heat, and stepping inside was like walking into a museum of his own childhood. The familiar creak of the boards in the hallway, the scent of laundry detergent and lemon floor polish. Ava was sprawled on the living room sofa, texting with her feet tucked under her. She looked up as Ethan entered and gave a half-hearted smile. "Back for a while, huh?" she said, her voice light but unreadable. Their parents bustled in the kitchen, laughter and the sound of clattering plates floating through the house. Their mother called his name with manufactured cheer. For a while, everything felt staged, like a play repeating its script. At dinner that night, conversation orbited around Ava, her plans for college, a new boyfriend, how she was considering a major in biology, or something artistic. Their parents hung on her every word, interjecting with admiration and advice. Ethan listened, nodding when spoken to, quietly collecting the familiar ache in his chest. But something in him had changed. The old hunger for recognition was there, but dulled, as if he'd outgrown it, like an old coat. When his mother offhandedly asked, "And what about you, Ethan?" he didn't launch into a list of "I used to be." But it's not all your fault, or theirs. They fell into a companionable silence. The cicadas buzzed, and for a moment the two siblings stood on common ground, neither favored nor neglected, just themselves in a sunlit backyard. When Ethan packed to leave a week later, his mother hovered near the doorway, hands twisting in her apron. Her words, for once, were hesitant. "We're proud of you, Ethan. I know we don't always say it the right way." He nodded, grateful but not longing. The words were nice, but they didn't hold him together anymore. He had friends, mentors, a new sense of self. And still, standing in the old kitchen, he found forgiveness easier than he'd imagined. Driving away, Ethan watched sunlight flicker through the windshield, the town and all its memories fading in the rear-view mirror. Family, he realized, would always shape him, but it no longer defined the boundaries of his worth. He was free, at last, to love them imperfectly, and to choose, every day, the man he wished to become. Fall returned into this. Fall returned the city in shades of bronze and crimson, and Ethan found himself standing at an intersection of memory and hope. The campus was familiar but changed, humming with the energy of new arrivals and old friends. The branches overhead stretched bare against a cobalt sky, signaling a season of endings and beginnings. Ethan was no longer a boy grasping for recognition. He moved now with a quiet kind of assurance. His classes challenged him, yes, but he welcomed the rigor. Even when deadlines piled up and sleep grew scarce, he didn't feel lost. He had a knack for balancing the weight, work, study, friendships, and moments carved out just for himself. Opportunity knocked in unexpected ways. One crisp morning, Ethan's philosophy professor pulled him aside after class. "I'm nominating you for the departmental fellowship," she said, her smile genuine. "I think you have something important to contribute." Her words settled over him like a gentle hand on his shoulder, confirmation not of arrival, but of the journey itself. In the apartment, watching the sun fade behind the trees, the world outside glowed gold and blue. He dialed home, not for help, not out of obligation, but simply to share the moment. His mother answered, her voice soft with surprise. "I wanted to tell you," Ethan began, "that I'm applying for the fellowship. I think I have a real shot." There was a pause, and then a warmth bloomed on the other end of the line, a pride that had nothing to do with Ava or any sibling rivalry. "That's wonderful, Ethan. Really, it is. We're proud of you." He smiled, not for her words, but for the man saying them to himself. The future, Ethan realized, would never be certain. It would hold setbacks and victories, losses and gains. But he saw now how each moment, each small triumph and every ache had prepared him for the risk of dreaming boldly. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in the quiet hope of what was to come. Soon the world would open up for him, and this time, he was certain he was ready. Embracing change. The end of the year arrived quietly, as if the world itself moved carefully around the coming transition. Campus buzzed with anticipation and the final rush of deadlines, but for Ethan, everything felt strangely still, as if he stood at the eye of a personal storm. He had learned to recognize change not as a single dramatic event, but as a series of small moments. A conversation, a glance, a choice made in the quiet of his own mind. Sometimes change swept in with the force of a river. Other times it arrived like dew on the morning grass. Ethan's life was full yet unrecognizable from the version he had left behind only a few years before. He moved through his days with new fluidity, greeting acquaintances on the quad, losing hours in the rhythm of research, trading ideas late into the night with friends. Gone were the sharp edges of self-doubt that once chafed his every step. With the fellowship interview approaching, Ethan found himself reflecting on it. Realized how hard it was for you. Ethan let the words settle between them. A bridge over years of misunderstanding. Maybe it had to be, for both of us. They talked until the evening chill sent shivers through their jackets. For the first time, their conversation needed no competition or comparison, just the comfort of realizing they were both learning, both changing, both growing into something new. After Ava left, Ethan threw himself into the final weeks of term. The fellowship interview was nerve-wracking but exhilarating. He answered questions with candor and confidence, drawing not only on what he had learned in classrooms, but on the stubborn resilience he had gathered year by year. When he finished, his interviewer smiled warmly. "We need more thinkers like you," she said. Days later, when the acceptance email arrived, Ethan stared at the screen, scarcely believing it. He let out a shout that startled his roommate, heart pounding with a joy that was equal parts relief and triumph. He texted Marcus, called home, and finally allowed himself a quiet moment of pride. That night, lying in bed as the wind rattled the windows, Ethan realized the most profound change was not the internship, or the accolades, or the growing independence, but the sense of peace in his own skin. The world felt wider, brighter, limitless. He fell asleep certain that he didn't need to know every part of the future. He only needed to keep walking forward, one step at a time. Change, Ethan understood now, was no longer something to fear or to chase, but to welcome with open arms. Ethan awoke to the steady rhythm of rain tapping against his window. The city was cloaked in mist, trees glistening under a curtain of drizzle, and downtown rooftops seemed to float far away in the gray morning. It was the first day of his fellowship. The sense of anticipation in his chest was light, almost airy, a blend of nerves and the belief, new and fragile, that he belonged wherever he chose to be. He dressed slowly, choosing a favorite sweater, careful with every detail. No longer did he try to masquerade in someone else's for equals. "Welcome, Ethan," his mentor said. "We're glad you're here. Let's get started." The projects were ambitious, the discussion lively. Ethan found himself speaking up, sharing ideas, sometimes holding back just to listen, learning from the stories and contradictions in the room. There were flashes of uncertainty, moments when it would have been easy to shrink back. But each time, he pushed forward, curious, open, willing to risk being wrong. During lunch, he stepped outside under the drizzle and called Marcus, who was starting a job in another state. "How's the new gig?" Marcus asked, his laughter infectious even over the distance. "It's real, Mark. I'm really here," Ethan replied, surprise and pride threading his voice. "I'm not pretending, for the first time." He heard Marcus smile. "You're not that kid anymore, Ethan. I told you you'd make it." That evening, Ethan walked home slowly through rain-slicked streets. Lights glimmered behind curtains in apartment windows. Music drifted from a bar at the corner, mingling with the smell of summer earth and asphalt. His thoughts wandered to his family. He composed a message to Ava about her own college journey, then paused and wrote their parents a short, honest note. "Thank you for helping me get here. I hope you're proud. I am." Alone in his apartment, Ethan made a cup of tea and set his fellowship acceptance letter on the kitchen table. He gazed at it, thinking not just of the journey from there to here, but of the journey ahead. The fear, the doubt, they weren't gone, but they had become companions, not chains. As thunder rolled in from the west, Ethan smiled to himself and opened a fresh notebook. He wrote only 2 words on the first page. I begin. This time the future was wide open, not because it promised certainty, but because he trusted his own ability to meet it, whatever came next. By late summer, sunlight poured through the city like still warm honey, and Ethan marveled at how freely life unfolded now. His world, once so narrow and circumscribed by self-doubt, cohort camped out in the library, scattered across couches and cluttered tables. Tension simmered. Samir snapped at Helena. Lily nearly erased a day's work by accident. But each time, Ethan surprised himself by stepping into conflicts gently, helping everyone refocus. He found his balance, that place between taking charge and simply listening, knowing when to offer insight and when to be silent. One night, as the clock inched toward 2 a.m., Ethan looked around at his friends, heads bent over laptops, laughter echoing off high ceilings, the ordinary magic of shared purpose holding them together. He remembered feeling so alone years ago, believing he had to achieve everything by himself. He saw now how all of it, struggle, resilience, even heartbreak, had been preparing him for this, the chance to belong not through perfection, but through openness. Outside the circle of academia, Ethan's family life quietly shifted as well. Ava called one night, her voice uncertain but open. "Can I come visit you this fall?" she asked. "I want to see what all the fuss is about." For a moment, Ethan felt the old pang of sibling rivalry, then smiled. "You're always welcome, Ava." Really, maybe, he thought. They were learning to redefine family on their own terms. As August waned, the cohort celebrated the completion of their fellowship project. They took a photo, arms draped across shoulders, faces flushed with pride. It wasn't the grand, solitary victory Ethan once thought he needed, but something deeper, fuller. He printed the photo and taped it above his desk, a new circle, chosen and earned. The city's skyline shimmered behind him as he walked home alone that night. Ethan paused on a bridge, watching headlights stretch into the distance. He felt a sense of possibility so strong it left him breathless. He no longer feared the unpredictability of the future. Each new connection, friend, mentor, even sibling, felt like proof that vulnerability was strength. That there gone was the boy who doubted every answer. In his place stood a man who welcomed imperfection, trusted the work and the people beside him. As they filed onto the stage, bright lights blinded him for a moment. The first rows were crowded with professors, classmates, even his mother and Ava, faces alight with anticipation. There was a moment, his moment, when he stood at the microphone, the city's pulse echoing in his chest. He spoke not just of their project, but of errors and insights gained. He thanked his team and let his pride shimmer without shame. Afterwards, the room erupted in applause. Lily wept with joy. Helena whooped and hugged them all. Samir snapped a triumphant selfie. Ethan's mother pressed her hands to her lips, eyes shining. At a quiet cafe that evening, Ava slid a mug of cocoa his way. "You were great up there, you know," There was a softness to her voice Ethan hadn't heard since they were children. He shrugged, smiling. We were all great. Isn't that the point? Ava nodded. I get it now. I think I used to be afraid of growing up, but watching you, I'm not so scared anymore. They sat in companionable silence, two siblings who learned, through stumbles and false starts, to show up for each other. Outside, the city glimmered, alive, unpredictable. In the weeks that followed, as he dove into new classes and projects, Ethan found himself exploring old haunts and discovering new ones. He ran into former professors who greeted him as an equal. He applied for another research grant, wrote a guest column for the campus paper, invited Helena and Samir for dinner that turned into a night of stories and music. Old narrowness had given way to a life that felt wide open. Ethan no longer sought milestones as proof of worth. Instead, each threshold he crossed, personal, academic, or relational, felt like both a celebration and an invitation. There would always be uncertainty, he knew, but he now welcomed it as a space for discovery. On a foggy Saturday morning, Ethan walked Ava to the train station. They hugged, awkward but sincere. Promise you'll come visit? He asked. Promise, she said. I want to see the world through your eyes for a while.